Aquilo, Season 9, Chapter 14, Last Meal. Panic is an interesting little thing, isn't it? It comes in so many different flavors, but much like pie, we tend to always picture our favorite. Well, favorite might not be the right word for it, but when I say pie, you all get a specific image in your head. To some, it's the smooth surface of a cheesecake. Maybe it's that creamy white of the filling, or a fruit glaze as shiny as a mirror. Others will picture concentric patterns made of thin apple slices, delicately arranged for both even flavor and decoration. There's also the classic weave of crust with just a little blueberry filling bubbling between the layers. It never ends, but for every individual, there's an image. And to that individual, this is what pie is. Panic is a little like that. Take my brother Eric. When things go south and get out of control, he freezes and starts to take command. At least that's what he imagines. He'll mumble orders to no one in particular, each as nonsensical as the last. He's basically useless until someone gives him a task, at which point he'll excel within those limited parameters. Dad just gets angry, pissed that he's lost agency over the situation. He doesn't try to mitigate the problem or help in any way, preferring to recriminate against himself, everyone around, and whatever god will listen to his vitriol. I've only seen Olivia panic once, and that was a special kind of emotional mess. Her attempts to save her daughter and offer what she thought of as redemption fell apart. Her version of panic was to make demands and attempt to reason with the source of her crisis. It was not a pretty sight, and I hope never to witness it again. The way I panic is also unique to me. I don't scream or run around. I also don't freeze up or become catatonic. Instead, like a child at a buffet, I choose more. I gather all the problems before me, then I reach for others. All of these issues I pull together, and then I try to smash them into each other until some turn into solutions. It's as bad a way of handling things as you can imagine. It's not a good pie. The raccoon's refusal to eat what was left of Ian's cake and donuts was a problem I didn't expect. It forced me to go back inside and dig around until I found something for the raccoons to eat. Not that they'd have starved if I hadn't. They've been getting a little rotund since I started feeding them the Aquilo's leftovers and failed culinary experiments. They still go around the neighborhood, toppling garbage cans and digging through trash, but I think it's more for the love of the game at this point. Then I spent half the night wondering why they wouldn't so much as take a bite of that food. Picky eaters? Poison treats? To think I had dozens of Aquilo citizens eating those things in my establishment last night. Petty, annoyed, but also curious, I'm making my own cake and powdered donuts. If what Ian brought wasn't up to the raccoon's standards, imagine what my customers thought of them. If any of them assumed I'd made these subpar snacks, what would become of my reputation? The oil is hot and my dough is prepared. I've only got perhaps an hour to fry everything up, give them a generous powdering of icing sugar, and split them into little bags for the customers. I drop my first ring of dough into the oil and watch with satisfaction as bubbles boil around its edges, a soft hissing sound accompanying the aroma of delicious treats. Which is, of course, when there's a knock at the front door. "Oh, Mother," I mumble. I'm not panicking yet, but that feeling of annoyance and foreshadowing looks similar, a tart to the pie, if you will.
"Sorry,"
Annabelle mumbles, scrambling in wearing a thick winter coat and a bright blue toque.
"I know it's early, but this is important."
For the first time, I noticed the snow that started falling since I came down from the apartment this morning. The white dusting makes me think of the donuts I'm trying to prepare, but something in Annabelle's face keeps me from rushing back to my oil. I suppose that first donut will serve as a sacrifice, another piece of crust. I'm still only seeing hints of the incoming panic. Meanwhile, Annabelle looks like she's got her whole pie in front of her. There's something in her hand, held tight in the grip of her mittens. It's hard for me to identify what it is exactly. The item, flat and about the size of one of my index cards, never leaves Annabelle's possession, even as she slips off her coat and removes her gloves. Despite the urgency she originally professed, my friend makes sure to sit down at the counter and wait for me to take my usual place opposite her. It's a postcard, not a fancy one, the kind you find at a dollar store or a badly stocked souvenir shop. This one features a generic photo of a forest with a squirrel in the foreground. The word Vermont is plastered in brush script across the top in obnoxious yellows and oranges.
I was doing my shift last night,
Annabelle begins, before I can ask if she wants something to eat or even offer some hot coffee to warm her bones.
and at the end of the bar, I see a nice comptoir. So I think, hey, things must be better if she's out having a drink.
She swallows hard, and I take the opportunity to get her a vulgar glass of water. It's not the soothing hot chocolate I want to offer, but it's what she needs.
Then
She continues after a sip.
I notice the empty glasses in front of her, and I'm thinking, oh no, things are not better at all. So I go over and I try to do my thing, have a chat, see what's up, be that shoulder to lean on. I don't have a lot of tricks up my sleeve, but at least I can listen. By the time I get close, she's already getting up, and not because she didn't see me. She's grabbing her things, putting a few bills on the bar top, a patron settling a tab. Then, on top of those bills, she adds this.
Finally, after all this preamble, Annabelle puts the card squirrel up on the counter and slides it over to me.
She apologized for not coming over herself, said the cafe had too many memories.
At that moment, I decide that I don't want to read whatever is at the back of that card. Slipping a fingernail under the thick photo, I lift it from the counter. My eyes connect with the variety of nicks and scratches on its surface. Blood pinprick left by Agnes, and that accursed dent where Gulliver broke his hand. Without noticing, Annabelle floated this harbinger of tragedy over a road of trauma. I adore this countertop. It's the centerpiece of my cafe, added after the whole place was laid to ruins by the Inquisition. But for the first time since it was installed, I consider having it changed.
Did you read it?
I ask, voice weak with fear and anticipation. Annabelle nods. The urgency is behind us. With her mission accomplished, she no longer has that panic in her voice, for better or worse. It's not just the card that she's passed along, but the pie as well, ready for me to visualize it to my own standards. Flipping over the image of that hapless squirrel, I can almost smell the crust and fruit filling. There's no good news here. The only question is how bad it is and how brutal the delivery will be. Ms. Dufour. Ever since I first brought her to the cafe, Nisha has been in love with the place, especially the food. It may be a strange request, but I'd like to hire you to cater a small event, to bring the Aquilo to Nisha's hospital room. No need for coffee, but hot chocolate and cookies would be great. Please have enough for a tea party, if you know what I mean. No worries, I will pay for whatever the extra guests won't eat. I have to warn you that Nisha may not have much of what you bring, but I guarantee that she'll love it. This could very well be her last meal. Thank you so much for this and all the care you've offered us in the past. Anais Comptoir. I read the card twice, hoping the contents will have changed from one time to the other. Of course they haven't. Every single word remains the same, carrying equal weight, right down to last meal. We sit in silence, Annabelle and I, letting the brutality of Anais' request hover between us. One more tragedy over my counter, though an invisible one this time.
Miriam?
Annabelle asks an eternity later. The distress in her voice is unmistakable. Of course, the impact of Anais' note isn't lost on her. She's known the Comtoise for longer than I have and has seen Nisha's decline from the very beginnings of her disease, along with everyone else in Aquilo. However, there's something else in those blue eyes of hers. That glamour she picked up from the forest is back with a vengeance. The magic of those woodland spirits is at work again, glowing bright at the center of her pupils. All around that spark, though, is nothing but raw fear and panic.
Annabelle?
The cracks start showing in my own voice as I reach out to take her hand.
It's bad,
She says, her features slack, lost in confusion.
I know it's bad. I've read the damn thing and I understand every word.
Her esophagus bulges as she swallows hard. She knocks over the glass of water, sending it rolling off the counter to shatter on the floor tiles, all so she can grab Anais' message. Annabelle waves the card in my face, the squirrel blurring with the movement into a mess of green and gray.
I can't feel it, Miriam,
She spits out, a confusion born out of fear and guilt.
I should be devastated, and I am, but I don't feel it.
She drops the card, letting it fall into a shallow pool of spilled water, burying her face in her arms.
I want to feel again.
There's a new cloud hovering over Aquilo. No one worships under this arrival, and the shadow it casts is darker and colder than the bright cumulus the Pilvists used to pray to. This cloud isn't a physical entity. It doesn't hold a nature goddess, nor is it the key to unmaking any strange hellgate. It's a far more ominous presence, looming invisible above everyone. Invisible, but not unfelt.
So,
Sinclair says, breaking a half-hour-long silence.
what are you going to do?
We're back in my apartment, both sitting on the floor in the corridor. It's mother knows how late, and we've barely spoken since his arrival. He said he wanted to discuss his latest find about Philomen, but I never gave him the chance. Stepping through my front door, he, too, sensed the cloud. I caught him up on the letter from Anais and Annabelle's situation. Voicing it all out loud in front of a conspiracy wall, it sounded like madness, but Thomas took it like a champ, never uttering a single doubt. Once he got the gist of the situation, he went to my kitchen, took out 2 glasses and a bottle of wine, let in a pair of raccoons, Brioche and Roberts, and sat on the floor. Normally, I would be outraged. One does not simply walk into my shrine to steal my drinking wine, not without my permission at the very least. Tonight, the sanctity of my kitchen feels so trivial. And what wine could be taken from my paltry selection that the illustrious Thomas Sinclair cannot replace with ease? He didn't offer any comforting words or amusing anecdotes, letting the silence blur the minutes into one another. Roberts found someone to scratch his ears in Thomas, while Brioche settled on a chair to stare me down. I'm going to bake the best cookies and brownies I possibly can, I answer. And it won't be enough. To Roberts's annoyance, Thomas leans over him to fill up my glass. Drink up, his gesture seems to imply. It'll dull the pain. But I don't want the pain dulled, especially not after seeing the effect such numbness is having on Annabelle. I'd rather taste a bad dish, no matter how gross or nauseating, than have my taste buds scraped off. I can go with you, Thomas offers. We can bring a bunch of people from the cafe. You, me, Ghost Moose, the Lagacé girl, even that angry woman with the knitting. Bring the Aquilo to her room. Maybe. I sip the wine, trying to find some joy in the flavor despite the topic of conversation. I'm sure she'd like that, but I've no idea if they'll let us drag a crowd into her room. Logistics feels like such a gross thing to discuss while speaking of someone's last days. The minutia of how best to serve their last meal should be an afterthought, yet it must be considered. After all, we won't get a redo. You only die once.
What was it you wanted to tell me about Philomen?
I attempt to change the subject, desperate to think of something else. Sinclair doesn't need much coaxing. Laboriously, he pulls himself to his feet, leaving a disappointed raccoon to waddle away in search of a new lap to enjoy. All right, he says, eyes scanning the wall, moving from one photo to the next, from one index card to the other.
So, I did a bit of digging, and I found something interesting.
Wine glass in one hand, he pulls out the pin from an index card with the other. The card falls down, flipping and tumbling along the wall until it comes sliding on the floor. For a moment, it looks like Brioche might go after it, but Thomas is quick to bend down and pick it up. I catch the name on the card. Phyllis Baker.
I did my due diligence,
Sinclair continues.
Stepping out from the umbrella of crack conspiracy theorist isn't easy. I'm going to need to be more thorough with my research and more transparent with my evidence.
He takes a swig, punctuating his statement with determination.
Take Phyllis Baker.
He flips the card to show me.
The name alone is enough to elicit questions. The first name is similar to Philomen, while the surname is literally her job description. That one came out of the skin of the other makes the implications fairly obvious. Yet,
Thomas lets the explanation hang unfinished, allowing me to fill in the lingering question. It's a little irritation of a game. I'd rather have the facts laid out for me, but then again, the distraction is welcome.
Yet they are two different people,
I extrapolate.
Correct.
He tips his glass at me, spilling a few drops to the floor.
Why the alias, then? Who is this woman that has such an on-the-nose name, yet isn't Philomen Dufour?
For once, I don't even know where to begin answering. The menu is blank, and I've no clue how to even come up with an appetizer. Without any clues to build on, I'd assumed the name was a coincidence and that Phyllis Baker was a follower of Philomen, a devotee who had sunk so deep as to sacrifice her own flesh to the old witch. Judging by Thomas's tone, I'm guessing it's not that simple.
Surface digging didn't offer much,
he explains, waving the index card around like a wand.
A lot of people called Phyllis Baker, but none from Aquilo or with any ties to the village. I tracked down some of the purchases you mentioned she'd made, her stall at the market, and any interaction I could think of. Nothing. No house to live in, apartment rental, or even a couch to sleep on. She never ate anywhere, didn't interact outside of the Pilvists, at least those who were willing to talk with me, not even clothes purchases. As far as I can tell, that woman started existing over the summer that you said she first walked into the Aquilo and vanished when she died for Philomen.
He squints at me, a clever secret hiding just a few more sentences away. Part of me wants to hurry him along, to get to the point faster and ignore all the preamble. After over half an hour of common misery and melancholy, seeing the smile creeping back onto his face is enough to stay my hand. Telling stories and cutting the skin of wild theories to expose their bones is what Sinclair lives for. Let him have this, I decide. At least one of us can dig themselves out of this morose miasma.
She had no next of kin,
he continues, the excitement building.
There was no funeral. No one claimed her remains. She didn't even have a bank account or savings for an heir to claim.
With a dramatic gesture, Sinclair pins the card of Phyllis Baker back onto the wall. Not in a random place or somewhere entirely new. Phyllis had been put between Philomen and the Pilvists. This time, however, Thomas added her right on top of the old witch.
Do you know what a tulpa is?
The word sounds familiar. Like the name of a family member I haven't seen in over a decade, or an ingredient that's only ever used in that one obscure recipe no one likes to make or eat. I shake my head, uninterested in tossing out theories of half-remembered conversations.
How do I explain it?
Thomas wonders, sipping again from his wine.
The term is borrowed from the Buddhist belief, I think. It's a thought form, a physical manifestation of something willed into existence.
A little like a homunculus in a way, but more mystical than alchemical.
He looks so proud and satisfied with his explanation, looking down at me as if expecting a gasp of wonder, or that I'll leap to my feet exclaiming, "By God, Thomas, you've cracked the case." Seconds pass as I try to better understand what he's getting at, my weary mind barely up to the task.
Are you saying that Philemon willed a little old lady into existence to help bring her back to life?
The question sounds even more stupid coming out of my mouth than it did taking form in my head. That being said, it wouldn't be the most absurd thing I've ever seen in Aquilo.
I bet there are layers more to it than that, but yes, that's essentially it.
He looks so very excited by the find he just shared, but I don't get it. Sure, it explains who Phyllis Baker was, where she came from, and what her purpose was. How that impacts our current situation, however, still escapes me.
Makes as much sense as anything else, I mumble, unsure if I agree with myself. I don't remember seeing anything about making tulpas or homunculi in the family recipe book, though. I think I would have noticed something about bread golems or sentient sourdough.
Tired of being talked down to, I pull myself to my feet. The sudden movements combined with the late hour and wine make my head spin for a moment. I have to steady myself on the wall, making a few index cards fall off.
That's my point,
Sinclair insists.
I don't think Philemon is like other Dufour women. She's not just a kitchen witch like you. She dabbles and explores. I bet she learned to rebuild her body from that nature goddess you talked about. She probably borrowed other tricks from a whole laundry list of supernatural sources. You say she erected that hellgate in the forest? But that was knit together, not baked.
He jams his finger into my wall, hard enough that I hear his knuckle pop. He doesn't show any signs of pain, intoxicated by his own reasoning. When I look, I notice he's touching the skull I drew as the epicenter of my tableau.
Whatever her reasons, he continues, she's gone to war with this, and she built a thorough arsenal for the task.
You seem distracted, daughter.
We're talking about glyphs again. Wrapped in a thick wool jacket, wearing gloves, and with Ophelia's scarf wrapped around my neck, I still struggle against the cold. Philemon is explaining how glyphs aren't magical symbols or incantations, but rather expressions of intent. Sharp lines and corners betray aggression, while curves and long flowing lines speak of calm and contemplation. Simple glyphs for simple magics, more intricate designs for the complex spells. It's all stuff that I know. I figured the importance of sincerity in making glyphs during my first weeks in Aquilo. Perhaps it's this ease and understanding that has made me lazy, using them seldom and sparingly. It doesn't matter. Sneaking symbols and runes into recipes is the farthest thing from my mind at the moment. My attention is instead drawn to the treetops. Occasional leftover leaves fall around us, weighed off their branches by the recent snow. They remind me of the fruits on the Aquilo tree and the potential they'll hold once grown and ripe. Mostly, I wonder if there's anything I could do with the Aquilo now. Perhaps some of the older Dufour women left some recipes in the family book that use other parts of the Aquilo. Tea from its leaves, bark soup, anything that I could leverage into a panacea for Nisha. All the while, I half listened to this woman, the source of so much death and misery in Aquilo, all in the name of her own personal conflict with the Pale Man. I'm fine, I say, adjusting the scarf as if it could grant me protection from Philemon's scrying eyes. We've been standing at her makeshift counter for an hour now. The two mismatched folding tables do a poor job of holding all her accumulated and improvised tools. Philemon has none of the surgical order I've been taught to keep in my own kitchen. Organization, cleanliness, and structure are all drilled into each aspiring chef's brain early in our training. It makes sense. Easily accessible utensils and clearly labeled ingredients smooth out the cooking process and avoid delays and errors. A proper kitchen must function like clockwork, after all. Seeing the disastrous chaos of Philomen's workspace damn near gives me anxiety, but I also feel a certain attraction to the disorder. It's the sort of environment that could give birth to happy little accidents or flights of creativity, but also food poisoning.
You lie,
she says, putting down the stick of charcoal she's been using to draw her glyphs.
and do a poor job of it.
She picks up a piece of raw ginger, which she chews on. I wonder for a moment if her purpose is medicinal or recreational. Candy ginger is a peculiar treat. I can't imagine chewing raw ginger for fun. Leaning back on the table, she follows my gaze towards the heavens, filling her lungs with cold air and closing her eyes. How she survives the increasingly bitter weather wearing such light clothes is beyond me, but I have to assume the answer is magic. Always magic.
Daughter,
She says, her tone soft, almost devoid of its usual abrasive quality.
we are both running. Don't think I haven't realized that. We're each caught in a race against time, struggling to make it over the finish line before a dark, cold opponent. You see me as a hurdle, an obstacle on your course. I understand. I've caused a lot of harm in my pursuits, but this isn't a race I can quit. This is why you're here, why you're so important. With your help, I can make it to the finish line and without hurting anyone else in the process.
I feel her eyes turn towards me, the table creaking as she shifts her weight. I don't want to meet her gaze, to be drawn into whatever connection she's attempting to build between us. Ophelia's scarf, keeping me warm, is also a reminder of what she said when we first discussed what to do about Philomen. Kill her. She was adamant about this, and there are precious arguments to contradict her, except, of course, the obvious moral question.
But,
Philomen continues, dissatisfied with my silence. She sounds like someone who's come to an important decision, pushing against the table to maneuver in front of me, forcing me to look into her eyes.
if we need to win your own race first, so be it.
In a dramatic gesture, Philomen brushes off all the papers and charcoal from the table's surface, a sudden and violent act startling me back to the clearing. Like a mad alchemist, she starts to dig through the bottles, pots, bags, and bowls that litter her tables. Flour, sugar, eggs I wouldn't trust to make breakfast with, and a small collection of various spices start gathering in a pile in front of her.
I can't stand between death and that child you're so desperate to save,
She announces, pulling her Aquilo spoon from her skirt pockets.
but we can hide her.
What Philomen does next, I can't exactly call cooking. Oh, she goes through the motions, sifting flour, melting butter in a pan over her fire, separating her eggs and incorporating spices. From beneath her table, she drags out a massive metal can of peanut oil, which she tasks me to put over the fire, first removing her simmering stew. At no point does she bother cleaning her cooking surface or even dusting off the powdered charcoal left from our lessons. It doesn't take long before I can see the writing on the wall. Though her methods lack refinement or even the most basic hygiene practices a kitchen demands, I know donuts being made when I see them. I'm surprised she has everything needed for such a recipe, especially a large bag of icing sugar that looks suspiciously like the same brand I use at the Aquilo Cafe. Then there's the magic. When she's not growling orders at me or demanding I get out of her way, Philomen is chanting. A low mumble, guttural and gravelly that has no earthly meaning. There are no words, no syllables, not even proper consonants or vowels. Like thunder rolling over the horizon, it's nothing but sound that portends terrible things to come. Before putting the toruses of dough into the burning oil, Philomene dips her spoon and allows a single drop to fall on the back of her hand. Her face contorts with the pain, but it doesn't stop her from chanting. A sacrifice of agony, part of the magic, I suppose. Only once a dozen of these malformed balls of fried dough are cooked and covered in powdered sugar does she finally stop. I hadn't realized how hypnotic and entrancing her growling had become over time. The following silence is like a void I'm suddenly falling through.
There,
Philomene says, proudly pushing an oil-stained brown bag into my hands.
This should shield your little friend from death's gaze.
This wasn't just kitchen magic, was it? The old witch looks at me, a wicked grin splitting her face in two. The approaching dusk has turned the sky from milky gray into the color of steel, the campfire overtaking it as our main source of light. The shadows thus cast on Philomene's brow and cheeks give her the appearance of an imp or demon, making me wonder what sort of deal I'm making.
Sharp-eyed, daughter. I've learned a lot on my quest to avoid the Pale Man. Some things divine, others infernal. There's a bit of everything in my cooking these days.
I take a step back, then another, edging my way to the clearing's edge. Philomene does nothing to stop me. She looks winded by the effort. This frenzy of sudden cooking and incantations seems to have taken everything out of the old woman. She stumbles to the log Gulliver used as a seat the last time he was here. Her frail and wiry frame drops onto the improvised chair, limbs like those of a broken marionette. I want to see her as pitiful, a wounded thing that suffers for each year she's lived beyond her natural age. Instead, all that sits before me is this death-defying monster with blood all over her hands. "And this will save Nisha?" I ask, digging through my pocket for my phone. My ancestor, now little more than a silhouette barely outlined by the campfire, waves a skeletal hand in the air in a dismissive fashion.
Whatever disease is eating her will remain,
She sighs.
but death will not find her.
White light blinds me for a moment as the screen in my hand explodes to life. I worry for a second that Philomene will notice, that she'll intervene before I can finish putting my plan in motion. Because I have a plan. Yet, when it comes time to press the button to send that message, I hesitate. Does she really deserve what I'm about to inflict upon her? Regret has already found me once for this kind of betrayal, and this time the stakes feel so much higher. "Thank you," I say, unsure whether I mean it or not. I hesitate one last second, and I hit send, alerting the Inquisition to come get their prey. Aquilo is written by J.F. Dubow and narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast platform. Want to support the show? Buy us a coffee. Go to ko-fi.com/Aquilo to donate. Aquilo has a Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Aquilo for details. Follow us on Facebook, Blue Sky, and Instagram under the username Aquilo.